Just give me 1 second. Oh, I haven't had my logo up this whole time? Shoot. Oh, I have it up now. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Okay, that's the right image. Yeah. We're gonna read a little bit of WotY Book 3. So, you might have heard some of this already. In fact, I'm gonna move myself. Because I did read it a little bit, the intro of it, at the end of the Christmas special. But now we're going to read the rest of it. Well, okay, that's the whole book, of course. I could probably do that in one sitting, but I'd rather not. So, we're going to go ahead, and I think just go ahead and read this. Let me just check something real quick. All right. And begin. Oh, wait, no, I can't begin yet. I gotta bring my mic a little closer. Okay, now I can begin, now that I'm all ASMR up in here. Nonami and Usuko were both blindfolded and being walked down a narrow hallway. They didn't know where they were headed. They'd only been told to trust the person now leading them. "All right, stop," she said, and both girls did just that. There was the sound of a key unlocking and a door opening. "Alrighty, girls, you can take them off." Usuko didn't need any further invitation, ripping the fabric away. In front of her was her cousin, Sakura Takibana, holding open the door of the apartment building's penthouse. "Whoa, don't tell me," said a shocked Usuko. "You're not giving this to us?" Sakura nodded with a smile. Her fox-like eyes narrowed warmly. "It's yours. I haven't been able to rent the darn thing. I haven't been able to get anyone to rent the darn thing. But I figured you and your friends could use a clubhouse for your ultra top secret shenanigans." Usuko just rolled her eyes. She still couldn't believe she'd accidentally let Sakura in on the secret. Well, to be fair, it had been Kuriko's new pet who had. Chupa-chan, as the bespectacled Pinkette had named her little chupacabra friend, was an escapee from the science department of Gardena, who had been analyzing him to figure out how he was so small. Fortunately, though, his diminutive form was what enabled him to be kept safely in the apartment, alongside Mr. Fuzzy, the pet goat Chupa-chan occasionally fed from. The two had an uneasy alliance. Regardless, the fact that Sakura was giving them the penthouse, that was beyond awesome, and the girl rushed to give her cousin a big hug. "Thank you so much, Sakura." Drink. Got a big old thing of water right here. While they were hugging it out, Nonami had entered and was in the process of examining the room, taking mental notes, it seemed. "This is very kind of you, Ms. Takibana," she said, turning back to the teal-haired woman. "But with your permission, I'll need to make a few improvements." "Like what, exactly?" she asked, eyeballing the vampire. Sakura didn't completely trust Nonami just yet. The fact that she just happened to be Usuko's great aunt seemed a little bit too convenient for Sakura's liking. But she was a friend of Usuko's, so she at least tolerated her. "Well, for starters, the windows will have to be replaced with UV-canceling glass. As a vampire, sunlight is deadly to me, but by canceling out the ultraviolet spectrum, it's as harmless as an exceptionally bright flashlight." Sakura pondered that for a moment before nodding her head in agreement. It made enough sense to her, she guessed. "All right, fair enough. Can't have you dying on me. But how much is that gonna cost exactly?" Nonami shook her head, smiling. "No, don't worry. Any and all upgrades and remodels will be on my dime and up to code, I assure you." "Well, in that case, I have a few requests I'd like to make if you're upgrading my building," She laughed softly. Nonami just rolled her eyes. Usako was already on her phone, texting Emiko the good news. She and Emiko had taken their relationship to the next level recently, just after the breakout crisis, and were now going steady as girlfriends. Though, in all honesty, not much had really changed between them, save for the now constant hand-holding and occasional cheek kisses. They were already so close that, in hindsight, they realized they were already practically a couple. Nonami, too, was soon on her phone, calling Lydia to let her know of the development and to make the construction requests to make the penthouse/clubhouse more safe. "Oh, we should probably go tell Hyoka, too," said Usako after hitting send on the text to Emi, "since she's part of the team now and all." Nonami raised an eyeball skeptically. "And why not simply call or text?" she asked with a knowing smile. Usako just wanted an excuse to go visit her friend. Truthfully, they hadn't seen the Yuki Onna much in the past week. Her and Gohan had been busy with the repair crews sent to rebuild and renovate her house after it had been nearly destroyed by the Yeti. "Well, she might not, hear the phone," was the weak answer Usako gave. "Usako, despite your name literally meaning lie child, you are absolutely terrible at it," replied Nonami, smiling as she adjusted her jacket and motioned for Usako to follow her down the hall. "But I suppose it couldn't hurt. Come on, let's go." She stopped, turned on her heel, and bowed deeply to Sakura. "Thank you very much for this amazing gift, Ms. Takibana." Twirling her hair, Usako's cousin just smiled and waved at them as they left. "Heave! Heave!" With each shout of the word, a stone pillar made its way ever higher into the air. The construction crew assigned to the Kagari house had been at this for several days straight now, and had nearly finished the project. The last part they had to complete was the living quarters for the Yeti, Gohan. As a large and powerful creature, he needed an area that could survive him potentially thrashing in his sleep, so reinforced stone and brick had been brought in to build it. The whole mountaintop was covered once more in a fine layer of white snow, just how Hyoka liked it. It's what had drawn her here in the first place, back when she'd been alive. It was almost magical, really, how the snow never fully went away, even in summer. She had begun to wonder if it maybe was magic, as the snow had vanished when the priest had set down his talismans, and came back soon after when they were gone. Hyoka couldn't help but giggle at the memory. When the day after they'd come home, the priest had come back and tried to lay the talismans back down. Instead, he came face to face with the ghostly girl and her very angry Yeti friend, who proceeded to put the fear of God in the man, who promised to never come back again if his life depended on it. Which, Hyoka... Wait, it did? Oh God, Akagi, you scared me. I thought the stream... Oh, my God. Oh, God, don't scare me like that. Not on these streams. Okay, sorry about that. We'll get back to it. Let's see. Instead, he came face to face with the ghostly girl and her very angry Yeti friend, who proceeded to put the fear of God in the man who promised to never come back again if his life depended on it. Which, Hyoka thought, knowing how protective Gohan was, it just might. Her eyes happened to glance down the path, where she noticed 3 figures coming her way, all ones she instantly recognized. The pink hair of Usako Takibana, her first friend after she died, was unmistakable. Almost as recognizable, even from a distance, was the orange hair of her companion, and one of Hyoka's other friends, Nonami. As for the final figure, Hyoka could feel her soul soar as she made out the form of her once and current boyfriend, Junji Masahiro. After things had settled down, Hyoka had returned to the game store she had visited with Sarah. Both her and the clerk, Junji, had recognized each other at the time, though neither knew why. It was only once her memories had returned that Hyoka realized the reason. The man had been her boyfriend back when she'd been alive. At first, he understandably didn't believe her, but when she told him the story of how they'd met and their secret word, he'd had no choice but to believe her. Hyoka explained to him that though she was dead now, she still wanted to be with Junji if he would have her, something he'd agreed to without hesitation. He came by about every day, checking in on his girlfriend, and bringing her by any damaged merchandise from the store that had otherwise have to have been thrown out. Hyoka had gotten several brand new games for free this way, as they'd been conveniently damaged in transit. In reality, the ghost girl was sneaking in late at night, picking a few games she wanted, and, well, whatever happened, happened. Of course, Junji had his suspicions, but it wasn't like his boss would believe him even if he told him, which the guy wasn't exactly keen on doing.
"Hey guys!"
shouted Hyoka, waving eagerly at the group as she rushed to greet them.
"Have you been, Usako?"
Matching her run, Usako ran to the girl with arms spread wide, passing through the ghost as both had once again forgotten they couldn't make physical contact. Slipping on a patch of ice, Usako slid down the path before colliding with a large, hairy, white tree. Glancing up, she realized that it wasn't a tree, but instead, Gohan's leg. The Yeti was sporting a pair of triangular black shades he'd been given by Junji, who commented they made him look stylish. Gohan, for his part, agreed with the sentiment, almost never taking them off, even at night. He picked the girl up by the shirt with one arm, setting her back upright before trudging back to what he was doing before, watching the construction of his room. By the time Usako had dusted off, the small group had made... Sorry, I'm tired. By the time Usako had dusted off, the group had made their way to her, all smiles at the Pinkette's expense.
"Sorry about that,"
said Hyoka meekly.
"That's probably my bad."
It's fine," replied Usako, rubbing her sore buttocks. "But yeah, how have you been? I haven't seen you since the ceremony." Hyoka smiled, glancing first at the house that was so close to being finished, then at Junji, who gave a small smile, then to Gohan, as he was apparently giving one of the workers a piece of his mind about something.
"We've been very well. The new house is so much larger than it had been. Plus, it even goes into the hillside now. I turned it into an ice cave."
She had a very prideful expression on her face when she said that, so Usako made a note to ask to see it later.
"Other than that, yeah, things have been well. I see you met Junji already."
"Yes, we ran into him on the way up," said Nonami, swooning for some reason. "It would seem you two were together, even before you died, which I must say, I found to be absolutely romantic. A love that transcends death. Oh, be still, my unbeating heart." Everyone stared at the vampire like she'd grown a second head. Realizing she'd said that part out loud, Nonami blushed heavily and bowed her head in apology. Hyoka giggled awkwardly and rustled her orange hair.
"It's fine,"
she said, trying to help ease Nonami's embarrassment.
"I suppose we hadn't looked at it like that."
Junji had a slightly uncomfortable look on his face. Not from Nonami's comment, but from the weight of the 2 duffel bags he was carrying. They contained many of his belongings, as he was moving in with Hyoka once the house was finished. "If you ladies don't mind," he said with a small grunt, "I'm gonna take these inside and get to unpacking. That okay?"
"Of course, love," beamed Hyoka. "Maybe see if Gohan will give you a hand with one of those."
Nodding, he made his way to the end of the path, handing the heavier of the two bags to the Yeti before heading inside. Gohan glanced at the bag for a moment before disregarding it and hurling it over his shoulder into the trees, grunting contently.
Gohan!
Admonished Hyoka as she went into the woods after it.
Shame on you! You two go on ahead. I'll be back in a moment.
Making their way to the door, Usako noticed that a third grave marker had been added to the ones for Hyoka's parents. She leaned down to get a better look at the name.
Huh, the first name's pretty smudged, but I think I can make out a couple letters.
Exiting the house, trying to figure out where Gohan was with his other bag, Junji found the two at the small shrine. Oh, I see you found it. Yeah, it was Hyoka's idea. She wanted to bury the memory of her previous self. Seeing Usako's confusion, he elaborated. Hyoka's early life was hard for her. She knew from an early age she wasn't a boy, and so a lot of kids bullied her for expressing herself the way she wanted to be. Adults, too. Her parents were really the only ones who ever accepted her, and even then, not fully.
So the name on the stone is...
The man nodded, his tone a bit stern but understanding. Her dead name, yes. And I'd ask kindly that you forget it if you saw it. Both girls nodded, Usako especially so.
I've only ever known her as Hyoka,
she said cheerfully.
Oh, well, I mean, aside from when we first met and we all called her Hime.
Junji nodded, turning towards the trees as Hyoka came rushing back, carrying the bag Gohan had yeeted.
I'm so sorry about that, love,
she cried, rushing to her partner and kissing his cheek.
Gohan can be so rude sometimes, I swear, but he means well. Where are my manners? Come in, all of you.
Entering the house, you would have never known it was the same building Usako had been in several weeks prior. In fact, with the exception of the foundation, it wasn't. So much of it had been damaged when Gohan had pursued Usako, and during the subsequent Christmas blizzard, that what was left had to be torn down before construction could start. Hyoka had been sad to see it go, but now that it was nearly complete, she had to say she much preferred this new home. Nearly triple the original size when accounting for the Yeti's portion of the house, it now had a much larger living room and kitchen, as well as an added dining room and bathroom, and now had 2 bedrooms for Hyoka and Junji. Though the ghost girl didn't need sleep anymore, though she still could if she felt like it, she'd found that she still enjoyed the privacy of having her own room. Underneath the snowflake-shaped bed, her boyfriend's idea, not hers, though she loved it all the same, was a water-powered kinetic energy device she could use to draw energy from when she needed it. Aside from the floor plan changes, the ceilings and door frames have been raised to 11 feet to allow the Yeti to walk around without having to duck all the time. The final and most recent addition was Hyoka's pride and joy, the ice cave she had dug deep into the hillside. Inviting her guests to explore, Hyoka phased into the walls as she glided down the glassy tunnel. It hadn't exactly been dug with the living in mind, and even the 4'11" Nonami found herself ducking at times.
There's actually an old mine shaft just ahead,
she explained as she continued the tour.
At least, I think it is, though I couldn't find an entrance. Also, the walls are kind of weird looking.
Coming to the end of the ice, the three entered a larger and much darker, dirt-covered tunnel that seemingly stretched forever in either direction. Nonami approached the wall, brushing some of the dirt and dust away. "Am I imagining things?" she said. "Or is it made of metal?" Usako walked up next to her and placed her hand on it before quickly pulling it away. "It is, and it's cold," she commented. "That's really weird. I mean, what are we in here?" "Could be an old bunker from the war," offered Junji as an explanation. "Whatever it is, It's giving me the creeps, and that's hard to do.
Yeah,
Agreed Usako, also a bit unsettled herself now.
let's get out of here. There's something really cool we have to tell ya.
As they left, not one of them noticed a faint green light flickering on in the shadows of the tunnel, its wavering glow existing only for a moment before going dark once more. Foreshadowing. It was another day like any other in the Gardnet gym. A few beings would come and go, using the machines or lifting barbells. One difference between this gym and a human gym, however, were the ridiculous sizes of some of the weights, meant to accommodate those with high strength or who had a larger size. Currently, 2 of the biggest weights were in use, being lifted in tandem by one Rei Kobayashi. Their combined weight was nearly equal to a freight train engine, but the Red Oni was barely even sweating. To her, this barely qualified as a warm-up anymore. The door opened, and a disheveled-looking human man walked in, his clothes torn and filthy, his beard unkempt and peppered with gray. His name was Fubaru Kanzaki. Hold on, I'm making an executive decision. I'm changing his name to Subaru. His name was Subaru Kanzaki, and he was one of Rei's close friends, and though he looked homeless, it was only by choice, as the man's swordsmanship skills were legendary. Setting the weights back down on the rack, Rei walked over to him, taking a long drink from her water bottle.
Hey, Sensei,
She said, pulling him into a hug.
it's been too long. Have you been?
Returning the hug, Subaru replied, I have been, well, keeping busy to be sure. Though I heard an interesting rumor that a certain someone developed new powers. Rei nodded, opening her palm and creating a small flame on it. Reaching into his pocket, Subaru pulled out a cigarette and attempted to use the flame to light it, but Rei immediately doused the ember.
Sensei!
She chided him.
Come on, I thought you said you quit. Besides, this is like a no smoking area.
She pointed to the sign on the wall, indicating just that. Subaru returned the cancer stick to his pocket with a wry smile. Nothing gets past my star pupil, I see. But why is it you have called me here? He asked, placing his hands in his pockets. Certainly, it is always a pleasure to see you. But, as I've said before, I have nothing more I can teach you. Rei looked somber, sitting down on one of the machines and sighing.
A few weeks ago, a good friend of mine died. Was killed, rather. I'm just like having a hard time processing it, I guess.
Subaru knew this, of course. The Kappa, Josuke, had been one of Subaru's friends as well. They'd shared many a drink together when the Kappa's shift was over. He didn't know the full story of what had happened, just that it had had a serious effect on Rei. For as long as the man had known her, Rei was always a beacon of optimism, cheerful and full of youthful energy. These days, though, she tended to keep to herself, spending her time either training, sparring, or in her room. Yes, I can see it has affected you, Kobayashi-kun, he said, taking a seat next to her. I may not be an Oni, but I am certain I know the thought that crosses your mind. If I'd been faster or stronger, maybe I could have saved him. These thoughts are normal for one like you. But you must understand, it isn't your fault, and Josuke wouldn't want you blaming yourself for his death. Rei nodded, the words meaning more to her, coming from the man who taught her so much, than they did coming from herself. Standing up, she offered a hand to help Subaru up as well, and both made their way into the large gymnasium connected to the gym. It was usually reserved for large... I lost my spot. It was usually reserved for large-scale sparring matches, but given the two who would be facing each other today, they'd need all the space they could get.
Don't go easy on me, Sensei,
said Ray, a wooden kendo stick planted firmly in her hand. Have I ever? Replied Subaru, a small smirk crossing his features as the two engaged in a clash of speed and fury. Hope you're enjoying it so far. Since her sister was out for the day, again, Kuriko was home alone and bored out of her skull, while Chupa-chan snored quietly in his pet bed. There was nothing good on TV, and all the fun video games were locked in Usako's room. The older Takibana was very strict about not letting her little sister play anything M-rated without her around. All she wanted to do was play some Doom, darn it! Close to rip and tearing out her own hair, she was thrilled to hear her phone ring, answering before the first tone had even finished. "Social activity!" she screamed internally, but externally she said,
"Hey, Emiko, what's going on? Did Isako do something?"
There was a knowing chuckle from the other end of the line. No, everything is fine," replied Emiko. "I was actually wondering if you had any plans today, Kuro-chan. I need some help picking out gifts for your sister. Valentine's Day is coming up, and I'm just a bit nervous, I guess, and..."
"Yeah, sure,"
cheered Kuriko, so happy to be getting out of the apartment.
"I'll be downstairs in a few minutes."
There came a knocking from the balcony window, and Kuriko went to investigate. Outside, she saw Emiko, phone in hand, waving at her. I was thinking we'd travel the fun way, actually," she said, pocketing her phone. The fun way, as Kuriko had figured, was flying, and by the time the two had made it to the mall, the girl was close to puking. Emiko's flying wasn't so much to blame, as was Kuriko's severe motion sickness. After a few minutes, she was fine again, and the two made their way inside. Immediately, Kuriko led Emmy to the one store her sister frequented the most, the game store. "I don't know," said Emiko. "I know Usako likes video games, but I was hoping to get her something a little more special." Just then, she noticed something odd at the Gunpla store across the way. A shimmering, translucent figure deftly carried a large stack of similarly shimmering boxes, no one else seeming to notice when it picked up yet another and enveloped it in the same shimmer. "You see that too?" she whispered quietly to Kuriko. Both girls had the rare gift of Amasurl Kolmul's Orosurl, or in simpler terms, ghost sight. Though Kuriko's wasn't as advanced as Emiko's, only able to see spirits when she took off the very glasses she needed to see, she nonetheless had the gift.
"I believe so,"
she said, her eyes squinting to the point they were nearly closed.
"There's definitely a spirit over there, that's for sure."
Rolling up her sleeves, Emiko glanced to make sure no one was watching her before turning invisible and stomping her way over. "This'll only be a minute," she said grumpily, knowing exactly who it was. Sarah O'Malley was having a grand old time today. She'd come to visit the Gunpla shop she'd been frequenting ever since the last time she'd been here with Yoka. The Banshee had apparently developed a slight addiction to the plastic crack that was Gunpla, and her room back home now had shelves after shelves lined with mostly high-grade and a few master-grade kits she'd built. Today, she decided to finally take the plunge and build a perfect-grade kit, some of the most challenging there were. Of course, she also knew how costly this hobby of hers was. Sure, she could support it easily enough. She had literally hundreds of millions of dollars saved up from her centuries of merc jobs. But why spend it all on this when she could so easily import it? Of course, she wasn't completely heartless, as the store owner was known to acquire these kits in mostly underhanded ways. In fact, Sarah had amassed quite the laundry list of dirt on the guy, in case she ever needed to use it. That, however, did not matter to one Miss Emiko Ayame, who had managed to sneak up on the Banshee, who was softly humming an old tune from her homeland.
What the hell are you doing, Sarah?
She whispered harshly, the sound just loud enough to make the store clerk glance over, but, seeing nothing, shrugged and looked away.
I'm appropriating, nay, liberating these kits. The owner is a no-good perv anyway. It's justice.
Emiko sighed internally, praying to God for the ability to smack her. Pulling out her phone to avoid being heard by the clerk, she typed her response. "You're an absolute loony.
Get out of here before I tell Lydia."
Sarah gasped, nearly losing her focus on the stack of boxes she carried.
"You wouldn't,"
she hissed, but knew she absolutely would. "Fine, but I'm taking the perfect grade, and you can't stop me." I love Sarah. Returning the rest, Sarah floated into the ceiling, placing her new kit on the roof, before heading back down and meeting Emiko outside the bathroom. The Oni had gone in to change back without anyone noticing. Realizing this to be a great idea, Sarah did the same, exiting a moment later, fully visible. While that chaos had been going on, Kuriko had slunk off to the nearby food court and was now returning with 2 lemon shake-ups. One she was sipping for herself, the other she offered to Emiko, who gratefully accepted it.
"So, what are you two doing here anyway?"
asked Sarah, as the 3 walked around the mall, taking a few moments to just hang out. "I'm looking for some, gifts for Usuko, if you must know," replied Emiko through sips. "I invited Kuriko along because she's the only other person who knows her better than me." Kuriko adjusted her glasses as she turned to look at Emiko.
"And I gave you an idea, Emiko-san. Several."
"Kuro-chan," Emiko said with a small laugh. "Why do I get the feeling those are more things on your gift list rather than your sister's?" A bit of Kuriko's lemon shake-up ejected from her mouth.
"What? I would never."
she cried unconvincingly. Emiko just nodded, smirking. Then her eyes caught something sparkling in the light. It was coming from a nearby jewelry store. A beautiful sapphire necklace sat on prominent display. It resembled an ocean's wave, as if it had been carved out of the sea and placed directly into the silver inlays. Immediately, Emiko asked the clerk how much it cost. "Probably more than you can afford, kid," he commented rudely. "These are for adults, see? Not for you kids to play dress-up. Now, run along." Sarah could see the anger building in Emiko's eyes. She had only known the girl for a few months now, but one thing was for sure. Emiko hated being talked down to by anyone, especially if that someone was a human. She grabbed the clerk by the collar, lifting him up and nearly flipping him over the counter, but her cool-headedness came through and she merely held him to her face. "Now see here! You assume that because I'm only 15 that I cannot afford this? I assure you, sir, I could buy and sell this whole damn store at a loss and still be worth more than you'll ever dream of being. Now, I wish to buy that necklace for my girlfriend. That isn't going to be a problem, is it?"
"No, ma'am,"
he replied pathetically, his voice now several octaves higher, its previous smugness completely gone. "Good," smiled Emiko, her usual cheerfulness returning as she let him go. "I'll be paying with a card, of course." A few moments later, Emiko walked out, carrying a box that contained the necklace. She was on the phone with her father, telling him all about what had just happened and how she wanted that store to be hers by tomorrow. Her father laughingly said he'd do what he could, and he was just glad she hadn't punched him. Mr. Ayame, a.k.a. King Pertentek, the Blue, had been relatively approving of his daughter's relationship with Usuko. Certainly, he had no issue with them both being girls. His concern was more the fact that an heir would be difficult to produce should they ever marry. Emiko had just told him they'd worry about it later. She wasn't exactly in a rush to make a baby, though as the only child, she had always known it was expected of her. Regardless, she knew who she loved, and nothing was going to change that. "That was some show you put on, Emmy," commented Sarah with a laugh. "I thought for sure you were going to send him flying." Kuriko nodded in agreement.
So what did you get her? So what exactly did you get her?
She asked enthusiastically.
I want to see.
Opening the box. The box! God, I'm so tired, I'm sorry. Opening the box, Emiko revealed the vibrant, iridescent blue stones. Kuriko gasped at how beautiful they were, and at how they sparkled when they caught the light.
Wow!
She said in awe.
It's so beautiful. Usuko will love it for sure.
Emiko closed the box and slid it into her purse, smiling. Thanks. Yeah. I do hope so, she sighed. I've never had to buy gifts like this for another girl before. I know something like this would make me happy, though. I can only hope Usuko will feel the same. The three continued to walk around for a while longer, exploring some of the stores and buying a few things here and there. Kuriko attempted to get Emiko to buy her a copy of Doom, so she'd finally have one she could hide from Usuko, but Emiko shot that down faster than you can say Kako Demon. As they made their way outside, Emiko's phone began ringing. Usuko was on the other end and frantically telling her all about some sort of club. She was talking way too fast for the Oni to make out. Usuko, slow down. You're going about 100 miles a minute, dear. What is it exactly?
Oh, sorry, Amy-chan,
she replied, taking a second to catch her breath.
Did you see my text earlier?
No, sorry, I've been a bit preoccupied this afternoon. Sorry.
Oh,
replied Usuko softly.
Well, I was just letting you know that we have a clubhouse now. Sakura gave us the penthouse to use. Isn't that awesome?
Holy shit, Emiko mouthed.
You still there, Emiko?
Asked Usuko.
Hello?
The brunette shook her head rapidly, snapping back to attention.
Yeah, I'm here,
she said.
Sorry, yeah, that's incredible. Right?
Replied Usuko.
Hey, so why don't you come by later and we can work on getting it set up? Please?
Let's try that again.
Please?
Oh, God, I'm too tired to do the read properly. I'm sorry. Of course, Uso-chan, smiled Emiko. I'd be happy to. I just need to take care of one small detail first, and then I'll be there. You want me to tell Sarah, too? She's right here.
Oh, yeah, sure thing,
said Usuko, a bit confused. What was Sarah doing there? Her and Emiko didn't exactly hang out much outside of work. Weird.
Anyway, I'll see you soon, Emmy. Love ya. Love you too, Usuko,
replied a flustered and now heavily blushing Emiko. Later. Putting the phone away, Emmy was immediately aware of the smug, teasing looks she was getting from Sarah and Kuriko. Oh, I'm sorry. Is loving your girlfriend wrong now? She asked, masking her flusteredness with indignance. Nay, replied Sarah. It's just funny to see coming from you, old people, Majesty. Emiko grumbled something about her, but Sarah couldn't make it out. Probably nothing Emiko meant, though, since that was effectively the end of their trip. The three made their way outside, the Banshee scuttling off to the women's room once more to phase back through the ceiling, grab her kit, and meet the girls outside. From there, Emiko picked up Kuriko and the three of them flew off towards the apartment. Upon her arrival, Emiko saw Nonami and Hyoka had joined them as well. Usuko explained that she wanted everyone here. They were going to design the penthouse to best suit each of them. The only issue, currently, was that Rei wasn't answering her phone right now. Or hadn't been all day, for that matter. Everyone knew the Oni hadn't taken the death of her friend well, but even now, a month later, it seemed Rei was still pretty downtrodden about it. Part of Usuko hoped that getting this awesome new clubhouse would help lift her spirits. If only a little. Nonami, however, suggested that they let their red-haired friend take whatever time she needed. There was no rush, after all. Things had been pretty quiet around town lately, now that they'd taken down several more mind-controlled monsters. Something that worried the vampire. Not because she saw it as an ominous portent of things to come, but because she was afraid her teammates might grow a bit soft. Besides, they all needed to practice with their new elemental powers, as well as Usuko needed to figure out how her new form worked. It had first appeared just as Usuko had kissed Emi on the cheek, and it seemed to amplify her powers more than a fair bit. There's a part here I actually thought about removing. We'll keep it for now. She still retained her shotgun and baseball bat, the latter of which could now become a spear-type weapon with a curved blade on the end that could manifest light energy and hurl it at great speed. She'd found this out by accident one day while practicing, and would have taken Sarah's head off if she'd been alive. Needless to say, they all needed to practice, both with their powers and with working together. Sure, parts of the team worked very well. Usuko and Emiko were like two halves of one whole, as were herself and Rei. And the spirits were also making quite the team, but they all needed to be able to trust each other and work well together in any combination. So far, in the nearly 5 months they'd known each other, Rei and Emiko had nearly come to blows 7 times. Usuko still had some difficulty trusting Sarah fully, but was admittedly working on it. And Hyoka just didn't know how to fight beyond throwing a very weak punch or hurling freezy beams, as Usuko had named them. Perhaps what they needed was a training retreat. Yes, that might be exactly what they need. And Nonami knew just the place. The question was, would Lydia approve?
Well, I'm glad everyone could make it,
said Nonami to the group, now assembled around a pool table Sakura had sent up to give them some form of furniture. First off, I want to just express our deepest gratitude to you, Miss Takibana. This clubhouse is an incredible gift you absolutely didn't have to give us, so thank you.
Thank you, Sakura-san,
they all repeated in unison, bowing.
Well, I'm just glad you all like it,
she replied with a smile.
Ever since I found out my little cousin is a magical girl now, I've been trying to think of ways I could help out. I figured this was better than nothing. It's incredible,
said the cheerful as always Hyoka.
It's nearly as big as my own house. Maybe even bigger.
It's far too kind of you, said Emiko, echoing her statement. I know Nanami or myself would be able to pay you the rent for this place. But Sakura just waved her off. No, it's on me, really, she said. Now, you all figure out what you're going to do with it. My anime are coming on, and I don't want to miss a thing. Toodles! With that, Sakura left the other girls to talk amongst themselves. Immediately, the conversation devolved into talks of sofas, TVs, hot tubs, arcade machines, and more. Very quickly, the whole thing had become chaos. And I say we get a sectional, shouted Emiko in response to Sarah's vehement request for multiple sofas. They're big enough for all of us. They can be rearranged at will and would cost less in the long run.
And who's caring about cost exactly?
She shot back.
We got the queen of the vampires, the princess of the Blue Oni, and me here to fit the bill. Money ain't an issue is what I'm saying. I could, make ice furniture with snow cushions,
Hyoka half suggested, barely even audible over the din. While it wasn't likely to turn violent anytime soon, the loudness of the conversation was starting to freak Hyoka out, and she went to go hide in a corner of the room. Everyone noticed this almost immediately, and their yelling ceased as they went to check on their frosty friend, who was sitting with her knees tucked close to her chest, her arms tight around them.
Hey, it's all right, Yo-Yo,
said Usako gently, using the new nickname she'd invented for her.
Sorry we all got kind of carried away there. I think we all forgot how much you don't like shouting.
The ghost girl nodded softly, her gaze shifting up just slightly. Just then, the door to the penthouse opened with a mighty slam. Everyone jerked their heads around and saw none other than Rei Kobayashi making her way inside.
Hey, sorry I'm late,
she said, her chipper attitude having appeared to have returned.
I just needed to finish a few things up to clear my head.
Oh, let me try that again.
I just needed to finish a few things up to help clear my head.
Nonami was the first to approach her, standing before the red Oni girl for a moment, before reaching around and giving her a big hug. It's good to have you back, Kobayashi-kun, she said, meaning every last word of it.
It's good to be back, Issei-san,
she replied Rei, returning the hug. I just had a thought here. Yeah, there we go. That's better. And then... Sorry. We'll be done in a second. Yeah, there we go. Once everyone had been given a few moments to greet Rei and welcome her back, Nonami decided it was a good time to announce her plan for getting everyone whipped into shape. Calling them back over to the pool table, she laid her palms on it as best she could. Listen up, everyone. I have an announcement. As you all know, several of us have been granted unique elemental powers from an unknown source. Rei, fire; Sarah, wind; myself, stone. As for Hyoka, we believe her power may actually be water, judging by the way it interacts with her natural ice powers. Regardless, all of us have very little experience with these gifts. I know I sure don't, vain as I am to admit it. She noticed the slightly dejected look on Emiko's face, as the Blue Oni was the only one of the group to not have been given a unique power. Even Usako, it seemed, had the appearance of being able to control light now. All the Blue Net had was her strength, Shuten Doji form, which admittedly only a small percentage of Oni could do, and her Amasurl. Though with another Oni and 2 spirits on the team, these powers were more or less redundant, and deep down, Emiko knew it. Regardless, she was determined to make herself an invaluable member of the team despite that. There had been some talk about potentially transferring Hyoka's water power to her, and the Yukiona had even consented to such a thing if it were possible, but still. One thing we all need is practice, and I know just the place. Kaiju Island. Emiko's eyes went wide with fear and fury. Kaiju Island? She nearly screamed, only barely keeping her tone above a shout for Hyoka's sake. Are you insane or just blood-starved? That place is a death sentence. Literally. My family used to send murderers there as punishment. I'm aware of its reputation, replied Nonami calmly, but I feel that those of us who can die are strong enough to be able to protect themselves. Besides, you know the legends about that place, right? Emiko scoffed. Of course I know. What part of it's a family tradition to send bad people there got lost on you? Hold the hizzle up, said Usako, holding up her hands to silence them both. Kaiju Island? Legend? You're gonna have to back up. Emiko and Nonami exchanged knowing glances and nodded. Emiko had been doing a fantastic job teaching her girlfriend as much as she could about Monster Society, the different races, and all of that. One thing she hadn't mentioned till now were kaiju, and for good reason. Kaiju only live on one island, in the heart of the Devil's Triangle, explained Emiko. They're the reason for all the disappearances in the area. I know when most people hear kaiju, they think Godzilla, but in reality most kaiju are only the size of a small building or smaller. As for the legend, well, according to the myths, there used to be a race of purple Oni who lived on the island. These purples were powerful sorcerers, magic users that would have put even your ancestors to shame, Usuko. They went extinct for reasons no one knows, but they left behind these peculiar amulets. Small, maybe the size of a 100-yen coin, these amulets contain power personified, giving their bearer new abilities like enhanced strength, super speed, invisibility, and more. They're supposed to be scattered all across the island, and whether or not you believe they actually bestow powers, the amulets do indeed exist. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. On the strap was an oddly carved stone that almost resembled a face. I've never had any weird powers come from this thing, but it could be fun to search for them, I suppose. If the island wasn't, overrun with megafauna. Nonami shot her a look. I am aware that the island is dangerous. That's why I'm suggesting it, she said. As I said, all of our abilities need practice, and the best practice comes from these sorts of dangerous situations. Besides, I'd need to clear it with Lydia first anyway, given the island is protected territory and all. Nanami, said Sarah, no offense, but this whole argument's going in one big circle. Why don't you talk to Lydia first? Then if she gives us permission, we can take a vote or something. It was a fair enough idea, Nanami thought. Sarah was right. Before any of this could be arranged, she should probably have Lydia's permission. Kaiju Island was classified as a protected location, and unauthorized travel there was forbidden by Gardner. As one of the two leaders of the Japan branch, she was the one from whom permission was needed, if travel there was requested. Gonna grab a sip. Usuko had been eyeballing Emiko's amulet for the past couple minutes, and was reaching up to it when the blue Oni glanced down and sighed. You want a closer look? She asked of Usuko. The pinkette nodded meekly, smiling. Very well, just don't lose it, please. It was a gift from my grandfather. Loosening the strap, Emiko handed the amulet to Usuko, who stared at it. There was something off about it, and then she realized something else was off. Everything around her was tinted blue and moving in slow motion. What the? She exclaimed, her voice taking on a strange echo quality. It's like I'm in bullet time. Quickly, she let go of the amulet, eyes wide as dinner plates. Holy crap, Emmy! This thing, it did something to me. The brunette tilted her head. Usuko, are you all right? Rather than answer her, Usuko took the amulet and put it in Emiko's hand, but nothing happened. Usuko, she repeated, come on now. This isn't exactly the time for games. We're having a discussion. Emmy turned back to Nonami, continuing their argument. But I... Rather than try wasting words, Usuko decided to use her actions instead. If the amulet slowed down the rest of the world, then she could effectively move at super speed. If she was suddenly on the other side of the room, zooming around, then Emiko would have to believe her. At least, she hoped so. Gripping the amulet tightly, the blue tint returned, and once again, everyone was moving super slow compared to Usuko. She tried to move, but found she couldn't travel too far from her current position, only really able to make a step or two. However, the rest of her body was moving as normal. Usuko continued to think of how best to make this work, to convince Emmy that she was telling the truth. Then it hit her. the Oni's glasses. If she could grab those and put them on before Emmy could have registered it, that might well prove something was going on.
Sorry in advance, Emmy, she said, steeling herself for the leap. But it's not like you actually need them to see, so...
Usuko leapt up, snagging the glasses and rolling about 6 feet away, putting them on her face. And now, the flow of time continues, she thought with a smile, loosening her grip on the amulet. The effect was immediate. Emiko, sensing something felt wrong, reached up and discovered her glasses were missing. Glancing over, she saw a brown-eyed Usuko giving her a cheesy grin, amulet in hand.
Now do you believe me?
Asked the Pinkette, removing the glasses and handing them back.
This amulet, it slows time, or at least my perception of it, but not my movements. Bullet time.
Emiko was shocked to say the least, but it was the only way to explain what had just happened. After all, as a certain detective once said, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Okay, so maybe they do have powers, she admitted, the focus of the conversation now turning in that direction. Nanami, you should probably include that in your report. Where'd Nanami go? During the conversation, it seemed the vampire leader of the team had snuck off to make a phone call to Lydia. Kaiju Island wasn't something to discuss over the phone, but she did want to set up a meeting with her superior. The potential trip aside, she had questions regarding a certain someone who was being kept under tight security in the Gardner detention facility.
Yes, she has actually been asking to speak with you, said Lydia when Nanami asked about her.
We've been telling her you're too busy, but hey, I won't stop you if you wanna. The prisoner in question was one Elizabeth Kosaka, a former friend to both Lydia and Nanami, who had turned to crime after believing she had been abandoned by her former teammates. During the prison break 2 months prior, she had been captured and was still being held in the same cell. When Nanami arrived about an hour after she got off the phone with Lydia, she could tell that the Dhampir had fallen into a deep depression. Her hair, once dyed an incredibly bright yellow, was now mostly back to its natural brown color and hung down in matted strands over her face. Her red eyes peered listlessly through the locks, only slightly acknowledging Nonami's presence in the room.
Maria,
she said. What was that? Her voice sounding raspy from disuse.
You came. Thank you.
Nonami merely nodded once in acknowledgement. A small part of her was still hopeful that the old Elizabeth would come back, but she couldn't allow such feelings to become any more than that. Small hope. I have some questions for you. Hi, Kome. During our last meeting, you mentioned Usuko being something more than a dweller. I want to know what you meant. Elizabeth's face perked up a little at that, an echo of her previous smugness returning then.
You mean to tell me you, of all people, haven't figured it out?
Nonami shook her head, frowning. I've approached from every angle, but I can't find anything to suggest she is anything more than a half, nay, a quarter dweller. The Dhampir laughed, a truly awful noise considering the current rasp in her throat.
I'll give you a hint, if you let me out of here for a few minutes.
You know I can't do that, she replied. Elizabeth just shrugged.
Guess you don't care too much then. Oh well.
She turned towards her bed, making like she was going to take a nap. Nonami reached out her hand, telling her to wait.
You know my price,
she said, not turning to face the vampire.
So either you want this information or...
Her words were cut off as the cell door hissed open. Nonami moved to place herself between Elizabeth and the rest of the room. You make one move towards the door. One move I don't like. You look at me funny, she said coldly, "and I make sure you go back in there in a rock cocoon. Are we clear?" Elizabeth nodded, bowing curtly.
Of course. I'd never dream of trying to escape. I wouldn't be able to anyway. Not with how I've been treated here.
That caught Nonami a little off guard. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, noting that she did look much thinner and gaunt than before. Elizabeth laughed again, a bitter, quicker laugh than before.
They don't like me, so they rarely come to bring me anything. Food, water, blood, hell, even a change of clothes. I'm biologically immortal, sure, we both are, but that just means we'll never die of old age. Still gotta keep the body going, you know. I'm fairly certain someone upstairs is trying to kill me off."
"Lydia would never!" cried Nonami. Elizabeth started wandering the room, making sure to keep a fair distance between herself and the single exit door.
"Never said it was," she replied. "That overgrown house cat quite honestly doesn't have the guts. No, I'm talking higher. I don't know who, but that's not the point. You want to know a bit about Usako, don't you? Well, I'll tell you this much. The wings are the key."
"I don't have time for games, Elisa," sighed Nonami, using the old nickname she'd given the girl long ago. "What do you know that I don't?" The Dhampir, seemingly satisfied with her brief walkabout, returned to her cell, closing the door behind her.
"I told you. A hint. Nothing more. Nothing less. You're a smart cookie, Mary. I'm sure you've got this."
As Elizabeth watched Nonami leave, she couldn't help but almost feel a pang of guilt. She was sure that Nonami was just using the old nickname to elicit some sort of sympathetic response, nothing more. Still, hearing someone call her Elisa for the first time in years made her feel a bit happy. That happiness was cut short as the door opened once more and 3 security personnel entered.
"Gentlemen, my weekly meal isn't due for another day," she said mockingly. "So to what do I owe the pleasure?"
Wordlessly, the first guard opened the cell door and ripped her out, throwing her to the floor. "We're here to make sure you don't squawk to the wrong people," he said in a voice like smooth silk, before kicking Elizabeth sharply in the ribs. "Oh, and Mizuho sends her regards." 1 second. The second joined in, using his tail to strangle her as the third went to close the door. For what they had planned, they didn't want an audience. Instead, an orange blur rushed past, slamming the door in the hapless guard's face, breaking his nose and smashing it in almost immediately. Sorry, I read that wrong. Breaking his nose and smashing his face in instantly. Nonami's sharp vampiric hearing had picked up the sounds of distress from down the hall, and she had rushed back to find the scene that was now before her. A bloodied Elizabeth being assaulted by 2 security personnel. At least, they were dressed as security, but Nonami didn't recognize them. Whoever they were, though, they had made a huge mistake attacking Elizabeth. Without hesitation, Nonami called upon the Breakdown Sphere, or the Quake Breaker, as Usako had redubbed it, and let her elemental powers flow through her. She had learned that in addition to natural stone and earth, her powers also gave her control over concrete. She wasted no time in displaying this power, creating a fist from the wall, pummeling the first guard and sending him flying out the door and down the length of the hall. The second one ripped off his yokai crystal, transforming into something that resembled a cross between a chimpanzee and a WotY from Star Wars. An ape-man, though a larger breed than Aru Sarugami, Nonami noted. He released his tail from Elizabeth's neck before pacing the room slowly, as if daring Nonami to make the first move. She, of course, obliged him, sending another stone fist at him, this one aimed directly at his crotch from below. The man never stood a chance. He fell to his knees, cradling his crushed manhood and letting out one long, pathetic squeak. Something like that. Turning back to the doorway, she noticed the first guard had returned, also removing his crystal. His lower half changed to become the body of an enormous spider, taking up the entire doorway, chitinous plates appearing on his arms, and grotesque, slimy mandibles erupting from his cheeks. An arachne. Nonami couldn't help but shudder. Arachne tended to be both a very aggressive and very manipulative race. This one clearly was part of the former camp, lunging at her with his sharpened forelegs, trying to impale her. Dodging as well she could, she willed her spear to split into multiple spears, which then flew towards him. It was a strategy she had employed successfully many times before, only now it seemed to not be working. The blades simply bounced off his spider half, though a few did manage to graze the relatively exposed upper half. With a wet roar, he once again lunged, barely missing Nonami's face as she ducked and weaved. The vampire knew if she could get under him, she could impale the weak spot in the center of his body and bring him down. This was, of course, much easier said than done, as each of the arachne's 8 legs were sharpened to a point with serrated edges. Apparently, this guy had modified his body into a killing machine. She had an idea she could only have gotten from Ray. One that was so stupid it might just work. This next line, I'm not apologizing for it. All right, Spider-Man. Time to not feel so good. Apparently, he wasn't expecting her to just run straight at him, hollering like a baboon, and it worked out well. Nonami was able to use his momentary confusion to fall into a slide, skidding under him and calling on the spear. However, this proved to be a mistake, as from the tips of the arachne's legs came strands of webbing which began coating Nonami. That didn't make any sense, she thought at first. Arachne only produce webbing from their rear. Then she recalled a small militia force she'd fought a couple years ago, back when she'd first been partnered up with Ray. There had been an arachne there as well, who had modified her body in such a way that she had also become a living weapon. She could spray webbing from the tips of her legs, and shoot acid from the large fangs where her human legs would have been. This guy must have had a similar procedure done, and Nonami just hoped he didn't have the fangs. Unable to move her arms now, she tried calling on her elemental power. She'd been able to use it as a bludgeon before, but for what she was going to try, she needed a lot more precision and focus. Faintly, she wished she'd been given Ray's fire powers instead, because this webbing would be a non-issue. Regardless, she closed her blue eyes and inhaled deeply, focusing on the concrete below. She willed it to rise, not into a slab or a fist, but into a sharp spike. With a thought, the spike shot upwards like a harpoon, into the arachne's weak point, and he collapsed into a heap. Using a stone hand to lift him off of her, Nonami began shredding as much of the webbing as she could with her quake breaker, glancing over at the motionless body. He wasn't dead, yet, but would bleed out in the next hour or so without medical attention, which meant Nonami had more than enough time to scoop up the badly injured, barely breathing Elizabeth and rush her to the hospital wing. Let's see. Now we'll go a little further. Crashing through the double doors, Nonami shouted for a bed and a doctor immediately. the nurses rushing as fast as they could to accommodate. Laying the Dhampir down gently, Nonami followed along as they pushed her into an exam room and began hooking her up to a blood transfusion machine. One upside to being either a vampire or a Dhampir is that any blood will work for a transfusion. The only difference to them is in the taste. Nonami herself was partial to B negative. Standing near the bed, she absent-mindedly ran a hand through Elizabeth's hair. Her old friend may be on the opposing side now, but she certainly didn't deserve what had happened to her. Gardner never treated even its worst offenders like that, so Nonami knew something was up. Taking a moment to step outside, she phoned Lydia again, the cat girl already somewhat aware something had happened. "Yes, we will take enhanced precautions to make sure she'll be better protected," confirmed Lydia. "I think, however, we should be wary of current Gardner Japan staff for the time being. There's a team from America. I think they might be our best bet. Plus, they can take care of your duties while the 6 of you are on Kaiju Island." Nonami winced, sighing. "Please tell me you don't mean..." "We are the Monster Squad! Cryptid Ranger!" There were 4 of them, posing like characters from a tokusatsu series in the main lobby. It had been 3 days since Elizabeth's assault, and Nonami had called in the big guns to protect the prisoner. The American branch's elite unit, Cryptid Ranger. There were 5 of them, though their 5th member was a relative unknown and had elected to remain behind, just in case. As for the others, they were a vampire, Jonas Nightingale, age 79, Red Cryptid Ranger, and rumored to be related to the famous nurse of the same name. A werewolf, Grigory Talbot, age 26, Green Cryptid Ranger, an expert tracker and giver of powerful hugs. A gill woman, Eve Jones, age 28, Yellow Cryptid Ranger, and their tech pro, an expert hacker. A phantom, Alex Smith, whose age was unknown, but he was said to have fought in the American Civil War. He was Cryptid Ranger Blue. Together, they were an exceptionally skilled unit, who were responsible for protecting many of America's cities on the West Coast. For a brief time, Nonami had been part of them, but the way they operated just wasn't for her. To say they took inspiration from tokusatsu would be understating it. Everything from their matching outfits to the way they behaved and even spoke were derived from that particular genre. Still, despite their eccentricities, they had the highest successful mission count of any other unit in the organization's history. To say Elizabeth and Fumazaki as a whole would be safe in their hands would be an understatement indeed. "You needn't worry, dearest Nonami," announced Jonas with a wink to the slightly irritated vampire. "We will keep this wonderful place as safe as if it were our own home. You can count on it." It was a known secret that he had unrequited feelings for Nonami, not due to any of his advances, so much as the fact that Nonami considered herself a romantic. She had long ago fallen in love with a human man, but due to the enormous gap in their lifespans, she ended up outliving him, or at least she assumed as much, as he'd have to be over 100 by now. Others had encouraged her to meet another vampire, but Nonami found vampire men to be either too domineering or too sensual for her tastes, so she elected to abstain from such relationships entirely. "Jonesy," she said, using the nickname she knew he hated, "I have made my stance on your overtures very clear before, and I'll not ask again. Do not forget, I am your queen, if only in title." She paused. "But you and your team do have my gratitude for coming in and assisting." Not a problem," he replied, feigning an expression of toughness when in reality he was incredibly embarrassed at how Nonami had made him look in front of his team. "I do have a question, though. Is it true that your unit has an actual dweller?" The vampire girl couldn't help but sigh once again. It had gotten out a while back that there was someone in Japan who was a dweller. Usako herself wasn't very well known, but her reputation as the last of that genocidal race made her a bit of a target. Yes, and before you ask, no, she isn't warped or twisted or evil, said Nonami in a tone that indicated she would have nothing else to say on the matter. She's just a teenage girl who got mixed up in our world, and just happens to be descended from them. So before you go making any accusations, I'd suggest you remember that. I didn't say anything, he stammered, more than put off by Nonami's rather volatile reaction. Anyways, I was just wondering if... He was cut off as Nanami's phone rang, playing the first few notes of Hail Britannia. She immediately knew it was Emiko calling. Thankful for the opportunity to get away, she made her way outside so as to have better reception. Good day, Emiko. Did you obtain the necessary permissions from your father as I requested? She was referring to a conversation the two had had the previous day. Lydia had given them Gardner's blessing, but ultimately the final say-so had to come from the court of the Blue Oni King, as his family owned the island. Yes, I did, replied Emiko in a tone that bordered between annoyed and irritated. I know it's fruitless by now to say this, but it's not a good idea to go there. Your opinions have been noted, Emmy, she said, and you have full rights to any and all I told you so's in the event something goes wrong. But for now, it's time to procure transport. Do you have any suggestions? There was silence on the other end of the line. Not the kind that indicated Emiko was ignoring the vampire, but the kind that hinted she was thinking on the request. Finally, she spoke again. I believe I may know someone. An old friend of my family who owns a vessel that may be to your liking. Just be ready. He's quite the odd fellow. When should I tell him we'll be leaving? Nonami only had to ponder for a moment before answering. 2 weeks from now. Gives everyone time to do a little training and prepare. We'll leave at the earliest possible hour from the docks at the south of the city. You and I need to work on our survival plans, so I will speak with you again later. For now, take care. And that, I believe, is the perfect ending point for part 1 of book 3. Because the next part starts up two weeks later, so... Yeah. Thank you for sticking with this for so long. I'd say this will probably be a good at least 3 parts, maybe even 4. Yeah. What'd you think? I know it's a little, I'll be the first to admit the opening is a little weak. I didn't know what to do, so I just did what I did. But I hope y'all enjoyed it. Book 3, is there anything special about book? I will say book 3 gets dark later on. Holy God. Okay, for context, I wrote it when I was in a darker point in my life. There were some darker points last year. I'm not going to go into that. We don't want to go into that, but suffice to say, it was, yeah. It definitely influenced, is what I'm saying. But, it is a lot of fun. Got a little confused on why they're going to Death TM. Huh? I mean, they're going to Kaiju Island. Which I guess is kind of... But, yeah. This book, I will say... Oh, 1.9 KVs. This book is a bit of a love letter to Bionicle. If you are familiar with the original Bionicle series, you're gonna see a lot of familiar things. Not it's not gonna be overly done, but especially once we get to Kaiju Island, it's sort of a half love letter to Bionicle. It really is. This whole series, actually, I'll be honest, this whole series, in a way, is kind of a love letter to Bionicle, which you'll really get, like, once it's all over and done and you see what I've done with this, you're gonna be like, oh, I get it. Oh, Reiko, that's well done. Very good. At least that's the hope. But I want to say thank you, Kamini. Actually, I saw where you followed at the beginning of the stream, but I wasn't able to say anything because, you know, I was reading. So I want to say thank you for the follow. Yeah. We'll probably do more of this very soon. Because I don't want to do, you know, big gaps in between the stories. I'll try to do the next part tomorrow. Don't hold me to that. If not tomorrow, this... Ow! Bit my tongue. Oh, it's still sore. Ow. Okay, as I was saying, we'll probably do more, if not tomorrow night, this weekend, Saturday. Ouch. And then, yeah. This will probably be 3 or 4 parts. Yeah. At least 3. Now, it's not as bad as it was before. It's that, you know when you bite your tongue, of like a few days afterwards, it's a little bigger? It's a little easier to bite it again. It wasn't like, I didn't crunch on it this time, but I kind of came down on it, and I was like, oh, pain Pico. Pain Reiko. Okay. But, anyway. I'm gonna wrap it up now. Let's see if any of my friends are currently streaming. Yeah, Allie's streaming. I'm gonna send the raid to Allie. So let me just doot. Oh, that's in caps. Hold on here. When you get there, tell her Reiko says hi. Where's the... There we go. Oh, that's not... Okay. Alright, so, hope y'all enjoyed. Until next time, everyone, have a good night. And bye, Anara!